My younger brother works security at a hotel downtown. Has for 11 years. He calls it watching the lobby, which is his way of making the job sound smaller than it is. He's good at it. Notices everything. Always has, even when we were kids. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I remember it was Tuesday because I'd just gotten back from my cardiologist appointment, the one I go to every 3 months since the bypass, and I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of decaf, still wearing my jacket, too tired to take it off. "You home?" he said. Just walked in. "Is she there?" I didn't have to ask who he meant. There's only one she in my life. 51 years of marriage will do that. "No," I said. "She's at her sister's. Why?" There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough. "I need you to stay calm," he said. I set the cup down. He said. I need you to stay calm," he said. I set the cup down. My brother has a voice that doesn't change much. Same tone when he told me our father died. Same tone when he told me he'd been diagnosed with diabetes. Flat, careful, like he's measuring every word before it leaves his mouth. So when he said stay calm, I knew it wasn't nothing. "She just checked in," he said. "Room 422, with a man." I watched them from the desk. They weren't arguing. They weren't colleagues. I know the difference. I didn't say anything for a moment. The refrigerator made that low hum it always makes. I've been meaning to have someone look at it. "You sure it was her?" I finally said. "I've known her for 50 years, he said. "I'm sure." I sat there for a long time after we hung up. I didn't call her, didn't drive down there. I just sat. Here's the thing about being 63 years old. You've had enough time to understand that the worst moments of your life don't announce themselves dramatically. They come in quietly. They sit down across from you at the kitchen table and they wait. My wife and I met when I was 22. She was 20. We got married 2 years later in a small church that doesn't exist anymore. They tore it down in 1998 to build a pharmacy. We raised 2 kids in this house, a son who lives in Portland now, and a daughter who's 40 minutes away with 3 grandchildren I see on Sundays. We've had hard years and good years and years that just pass by without much to say about them. I thought I knew what our life was. I thought about calling my daughter. Then I didn't. What would I say? I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Her reading glasses were on the nightstand. There was a library book she'd been working through for 2 weeks, spine cracked at page 188. A glass of water she'd left that morning. I looked at all of it and tried to feel something definitive. I couldn't. It was like trying to read a page that kept going blurry. She'd told me she was going to her sister's for a few days. Her sister lives about 40 minutes north. They do this a few times a year, stay over, watch old movies, cook things neither of them will cook at home. I'd never had a reason to question it. Not once in all the years they've been doing it. I called her sister that evening. Kept my voice light. Asked if my wife had arrived safely. Her sister said, "She's not here." Did something change? She called me this morning and said she wasn't feeling well and might not make it. I told her she must have felt better. Told her I'd have her call when she got in. Hung up. I went to the window and stood there for a while. The street outside was ordinary. A neighbor walking a dog. Someone's trash can still out from Monday. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and I did what I always do when I can't sleep. I went through things methodically. Everything I could remember about the past year. The past 2 years. Looked for cracks. She'd been different. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could have pointed to and said, "There, that's it." But looking back with new eyes, I could see the small things. She'd started going to a yoga class on Thursday evenings about 14 months ago. She'd bought a few new pieces of clothing, nicer than what she usually wore, and when I mentioned them, she said she'd treated herself. She'd gotten quieter at dinner. Not unhappy quiet. Just somewhere else quiet. The kind of quiet I'd put down to getting older, to the natural drift of long marriages, to the fact that I'd been tired myself and probably wasn't bringing much to dinner conversation either. I blamed myself for that, lying there in the dark. That might have been the worst part of it. Not the anger, the inventory. She came home the next afternoon. I was sitting in the living room when I heard her car in the driveway. She came in with a bag over her shoulder and a smile that looked exactly like her real smile. That's what made my chest hurt. It looked real. I've been looking at that smile for 5 decades, and it looked real. "How was the drive?" I said. "Not bad. Light traffic. How was your appointment yesterday?" Fine, I said, normal. She went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. I watched her move around in there. Same way she's always moved. Like she knows exactly where everything is, and she's the one who decides where everything goes. She asked if I was hungry. I said no. She made herself tea and came to sit across from me, and we talked about the grandchildren and a problem my son was having with his car and what we needed from the grocery store. It was the most ordinary conversation I'd ever hated. I said nothing. Not that day. I needed to be certain first. Not just my brother's certainty, my own. I want to explain something about myself here. I spent 34 years as an insurance investigator. Not the kind who follows cheating spouses. I worked commercial fraud, mostly, but the foundation of that work is the same. You don't go in hot. You build a picture. You let the facts arrange themselves. You wait for the moment when there's no other explanation left, and then you act. Going in before that moment is how people make expensive mistakes. So I waited. I started paying attention in a way I hadn't in years. Maybe ever. I'm not proud of that either. But I noticed things. She kept her phone face down now. She'd never done that before. She'd go to the back porch to take certain calls, saying she needed air. The Thursday yoga class was running longer. She used to be home by 8:30. Now it was closer to 10. About 2 weeks after my brother's call, I put a small camera in the kitchen. Just the one. I knew how that sounds. I wrestled with it. But I need you to understand that by that point, I wasn't looking for something to be angry about. I was looking for a way to be wrong. I wanted the camera to show me nothing. I wanted to find an explanation that made my brother's eyes into unreliable witnesses. I wanted to be the foolish old man who'd worked himself up over nothing. The camera didn't give me that. 3 days after I set it up, she made a phone call from the kitchen. The back door was closed. She thought she was alone. She didn't know I was down in the basement. I'd come up to get a screwdriver and stopped when I heard her voice. She was speaking quietly, low and careful, the way I'd spoken to my brother that first night. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and I listened. "He doesn't know," she said. "I promise you he doesn't know." A pause. "I can't do this over the phone. We'll talk Thursday." Another pause. "I can't do this over the phone. We'll talk Thursday." Another pause, and then a small laugh. Soft. The kind of laugh that's just for one person. That laugh is the thing I keep coming back to. I'd heard her laugh 10,000 times. A different laugh for different situations. The social laugh, the polite laugh, the real one she does at something genuinely funny. This one was none of those. This one I didn't recognize. After 51 years, I heard a laugh from my wife that I'd never heard before, and I understood that it belonged to someone else. I went back down to the basement, stayed there for an hour, put the screwdriver away without doing whatever I'd come up for. I called my brother that evening. "I believe you," I said. "He didn't say I told you so. That's not who he is. He just said, 'What do you need from me?' 'What does he look like?' I said. He described the man. Younger than me by the look of it, he said. Maybe mid-50s. Well-dressed. They'd checked in under his name. My brother had looked it up after the fact, quietly, without making it official. He gave me the name. I wrote it down. Looked it up. Found him without too much trouble. The tools available to an old investigator, even a retired one, are not nothing. He was a real estate developer, divorced, about 54 years old, lived in a part of the city I didn't know well. I found his connection to my wife. She'd done some bookkeeping for a nonprofit he was involved with about 2 years ago. Volunteer work she'd mentioned in passing. The kind of thing I'd nodded at without really registering. They'd met there. 2 years. I did the math backward. The yoga class started about 14 months ago, so 8 months before the yoga class, meaning before it became what it became, there was already something building that I hadn't seen, that I'd been present for in the same house, at the same table, and hadn't seen. That's the part I had to sit with the longest. Not the betrayal in the abstract, the specific, particular fact of having been right there and not seen it. I didn't confront her immediately. I know that surprises people when I tell this. But I'd waited this long and I needed to be clean about it when the moment came. I didn't want to do it in anger and have it go wrong. I wanted to say what needed to be said once, clearly, and I wanted her to know there was nothing to argue about. There was also the matter of what I needed to arrange first. I called my son in Portland. He's 47, steady, not easily rattled. Tells it like it is. I told him what I knew, and I told him I was going to handle it, and I told him not to call his mother until I gave him the word. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Okay, Dad, what do you need?" I told him I might need a place to be for a few days, depending on how things went. He said the door was open. No questions. I called a lawyer I'd known for 20 years. He'd done our estate planning, knew our finances. I laid it out. He was professional and thorough, and when he was done talking, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, even though the ground had been moving under me for weeks. Then I waited for the right night. It came on a Friday. We'd had a quiet dinner. The news was on. She was on the couch with her book. I was in the armchair across the room. "I need to talk to you," I said. She looked up. Something in my voice, I think. People who've been married long enough can hear it, the shift. I told her that my brother had seen her at the hotel. I told her I'd heard the phone call in the kitchen. I didn't raise my voice. I'd made up my mind about that weeks ago. I'm 63 years old, and I'd already had one conversation with a cardiologist about keeping my stress levels manageable, and I was not going to spend what might be one of the harder nights of my life yelling in my own living room. She didn't deny it. That was the moment I realized she'd been waiting for this too, in her way. There was something almost like relief in her face, which made me angry, briefly, and then just exhausted. She cried. She told me she was sorry. She said it had started slowly, that she hadn't meant for it to become what it became, that she'd been lonely in ways she didn't know how to explain, and that she knew that wasn't an excuse. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. Then I said, "I believe that you're sorry. I'm not sure what you're sorry for exactly, whether it's this or getting caught, or both, and I don't think I need to know." She asked if there was any way forward. I told her I'd spoken to a lawyer. I told her the paperwork was already in motion and that I'd been fair about the arrangement and that she should get someone to look it over on her side. I told her I was going to our son's for a few days and that when I came back we'd need to talk practically. She said, "Just like that?" I thought about that for a moment. "It wasn't just like that," I said. "It's been 51 years of something. And now, it's this. The two things are both true." I got up, went to the bedroom, packed a bag. She was still on the couch when I walked through the living room. I didn't stop. I drove to the airport and caught a late flight to Portland, and my son was waiting at arrivals, with his coat on and his hands in his pockets, and he just nodded when he saw me and said, "You hungry?" I said yes. We went to a diner that was open late, and we sat in the booth and we ate eggs and didn't talk about any of it for the first hour. Just ate. The way men do sometimes when talking isn't the right tool yet. He asked me, eventually, how I was doing. I thought about the honest answer for a while. "I'm okay," I said. "Not fine, but okay." He nodded. "I keep thinking about the kitchen," I said. "Not the phone call. Just the kitchen. How many mornings I've sat in there. How ordinary it always looked." My son didn't say anything to that. He just poured more coffee from the little carafe on the table and passed it over, and I think that was the right response. I stayed in Portland for 9 days. Slept in my son's guest room, which smells like cedar for reasons I never asked about. I called my daughter on the 3rd day. That conversation was harder. She was angry in a way my son wasn't, fiercer, more immediate, and I let her be because she was right to be. But eventually she said, "Are you taking care of yourself, Dad? Your heart?" And I said yes. And she said, "Okay." I went to my cardiologist appointment remotely on the 6th day. He said my pressure was up slightly. I said I was aware of the reason. He told me to sleep and walk and eat protein, and I told him I was doing all three. I came home on a Thursday. She was staying with her sister by then. The real visit this time. The house was quiet in a way that was different from the usual quiet of two people not talking much. Quieter. Emptier. More honest in a way. I made coffee. Stood at the kitchen window. The neighbor's dog was in the yard across the street, lying in a patch of sun. I'm not going to tell you the end of this is clean. It isn't. The divorce is moving through the system the way these things do. Slowly, with paperwork and waiting. My daughter comes by on Sundays still, and the grandchildren don't entirely understand what's happened, and that's fine. They don't need to yet. My son calls twice a week. which is more than he used to, and I pretend not to notice the increase because that's how we handle things. My brother came over last month and we sat on the back porch and he apologized for the phone call. Said he'd thought about it a lot, whether he should have said anything. Don't apologize for that, I said. I know it broke things, he said. They were already broken, I said. You just told me. He was quiet for a minute. I hated making that call, he said. I know you did. We sat out there for another hour without talking much. The light went down. A couple of birds went through the yard. He left around 7, and I went inside and heated up the soup my daughter had left in the fridge and ate it standing at the counter the way you do when you're only feeding yourself. I've been thinking about what I'd tell a younger man if he asked, not about the betrayal specifically, about the part after. You're going to feel like the ground is gone. For a while it will be. But the kitchen is still going to hum. The neighbor's dog is still going to be in the yard. Your son is still going to have coffee ready at 6 a.m. when you're in his guest room and you can't sleep. And those things, the ordinary, unheroic, dependable things, they turn out to be more than you thought. That's what I know now. I'm 63 years old and I've had a bypass and a divorce in the same year. And I'm still here in this kitchen, still watching the light come across the countertop in the morning, still putting the kettle on. Some days that's enough. Most days, lately, it is. I've had a long time to think about what actually happened. Not the event itself, but the shape of it, the way it built over years without me seeing it. And the honest answer is that nobody wakes up one morning and decides to burn everything down. It starts smaller than that. A choice here, a silence there, a door left open that should have stayed closed. And then one day the small choices have added up to something that can't be walked back, and everyone involved is standing in the wreckage wondering how it got this far. That's the part I keep returning to, not the anger, the accumulation. There's something I learned in 34 years of insurance work that turns out to apply to almost everything. The damage rarely happens all at once. It happens in increments too small to notice until you look at the whole picture. And the whole picture, once you see it clearly, was always there. You just weren't looking at it straight. I wasn't looking straight. That's my part in it, and I own it. Not the betrayal. That belongs to her. But the drift, the years of quiet dinners where I was present in body and somewhere else in mind. The tiredness I wore like a coat I never took off. The way I stopped asking questions because I assumed I already knew the answers. That kind of inattention is its own slow damage. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it's not nothing either. What I've come to believe, and I'm 63 years old, so this is earned, not borrowed, is that integrity isn't a single dramatic moment. It's not one choice under pressure. It's the 10,000 ordinary choices that nobody's watching. The way you treat someone when you're tired. The truth you tell when lying would be easier. The conversation you have instead of the silence you choose. She made her choices and I made mine, and both sets of choices built the life we ended up with. That's just how it works. And here's the harder part. Rebuilding after something like this requires the same thing that should have prevented it. Attention, honesty, the willingness to look at what's real instead of what's comfortable. My son has it. I watched him in that diner in Portland, steady and quiet, pouring coffee without making a production of it. And I thought he learned something I'm still learning. My daughter has it too, in a fiercer way. She called me out on my health before she asked about anything else. That's love with a backbone. Resilience isn't toughness. I used to think it was. It's not. It's the ability to look at a thing clearly, grieve it properly, and then put your feet on the floor the next morning anyway. It's making the coffee. It's answering when your son calls. It's standing at the kitchen window and deciding one more time to still be here. I'm not the same man I was before my brother made that phone call. I don't think I'm supposed to be. Some things break you open in ways that end up being necessary, even when you'd never have chosen them. What you do with the opening, that's the part that's still yours.